Okay, in this course, I'm going to kind of back up. I saw some things in my course online, which is about the Constitution. It's called the Constitution 101, that went a little bit slower than what I was trying to jump into. So I thought it better to go back and catch that, especially since it dealt with some of the things that everybody is talking about today, which is slavery. Even though it's been a long time, we've moved past it, people are still looking back at it for some reason. I don't know why. Anyway, one of the things that I learned, not in school, but recently from a black man, was that the first slave owner in America was actually black. I did not know that until the last few years. I did not know that. His name was Anthony Johnson. He was a colonist. He was born in 1600, and that's about as far as I'm going to go back, and died in 1670. In 1621, he was held as an indentured servant. Now, it wasn't only black people that was held this way either. There were all kinds of people. Asians, Jewish, white, all nationalities pretty much would come over on a ship, and if somebody paid that passage, they could hold that person in a indentured servant position until they paid their passage back and their room and board, the food that they ate, the clothes that they wore, until it was all pretty much figured out how much that would be owed, and work 4 to 7 years until it was over. So this guy did this. He earned his freedom, and he was granted land. So slave traders had captured this man, gave him the name Antonio, and brought him to America. Somebody found him and put him in service. I guess that, well, see, they didn't call it slaves because you could buy your way out of it. But anyway, he got his freedom from his indentured servants and bought land. See, slave laws were not passed until 1661. So before that, they were not considered to be slaves. They usually worked, like I said, between 4 to 7 years to pay for their passage. Their room, their board, their lodging and dues. Most white laborers also came to the colony as indentured servants. It wasn't that strange a thing. Time has slavery beginning in 1619. Now, Anthony Johnson, he almost lost his life in the Indian Massacre of 1622. After that, though, he won his freedom. He changed his name from Antonio to Anthony Johnson. 1863 is when slavery ended. Now, the Articles of Confederation became the first national constitution of the U.S. March of 1781. Articles of Confederation established a government organized around Congress. Each of the 13 states would have only one vote regardless of its size. Didn't matter if it was big or small, they only had one vote. 9 of these 13 states had to agree on something before it could become a law. Now, the Congress of that time had the power to declare war, make peace, and make treaties. It could also coin and borrow money, create post offices, admit new states, and create an army and a navy. But on the other hand, Congress could not tax, and it could not control or interfere with trade between individual states. No one person was in charge of the new government. Everyone was so afraid of a return to tyranny. They were very cautious not to create a new king here in America, because they had just gotten rid of the other one in the Revolutionary War before this. There was no one to carry out the laws created by Congress, and that left the people confused. There was a loose friendship between states which kept them together for a war of independence, but without someone to carry the laws that are to carry out the laws, the power to tax or to regulate trade, it was not going to last. By 1786, more problems were surfacing, and there was not enough representation to get anything done, so they tried again in 1787. They called it the Constitutional Convention. They opened in 1787, and the delegates were not elected, but selected. They weren't elected by the people, but they were selected by the state legislature, and they had the ability, they had great ability, these people. They were people of known education, people that had went to war or had even served during the Revolutionary War. 2 of them became presidents, and 1 of them became a vice president, and several of the other ones went on to be big things as well. George Washington was chosen to be president of the convention, because this is the convention at this time. They were going to revise the Articles of Confederation. But when they got together, they quickly decided to replace it with a new plan for government. 2 leaders were absent, and that was John Adams and Thomas Jefferson. They were off in other countries because they were ambassadors for this country in other countries. One state refused to send anybody, and that was Rhode Island. The hardest thing to do was to come up with a balance between liberty and authority. Now, we went over some of these terms the last time that we had the class. Confederation is an alliance, especially of states and nations. Constitution is a document stating the systems of basic law and principles of government. Convention is an assembly, and compromise is a settlement in which both sides give up something to reach an agreement. A delegate is a person authorized to act for others. Now, a major concern was how should states be represented in the legislative body? Who would have control, small states or large ones? This one question almost destroyed the convention. They couldn't hardly get past it. Finally, they came up with something called the Great Compromise. It was the best of the Virginia plan that they had at the time and the New Jersey plan. So they took parts from each of them and put it together. The compromise was called for a Congress with 2 houses. The House of Representatives, which was based on the population of the state to be voted for every 2 years, and the second, the House, is the Senate. Sorry. Senators elected for a 6-year term. Now, the Declaration and the Constitution are the same, but they provide two different functions. Now, some people think that the Declaration was meant to be radical, and that the Constitution was supposed to be conservative. But that's not really the case. They were put together at the same time, but they were supposed to do two different things. See, the Declaration is a statement of timeless principles. It also listed the wrongs committed by the King of England. 3, it was the conclusion of Part 1 and 2, which justified the throwing off of the old government and starting a new one. Now, the Constitution expresses the formal causes of how a government is supposed to look or work. Why is a government necessary? See, the founders believed that people are called to do right, but sometimes fail. But they also believe that the government has to be controlled by the governed, which is us, or they might turn into tyrants. They were very afraid of that because they had lived under that type of style and rule. Now, what kind of government is established by the Constitution? It separates the government into 3 branches. It's the legislative, the executive, and the judicial. Government is limited in power, but can take care of the national defense and the national commerce. It's a limited government, but strong enough to take care of its ends, to achieve its ends. Now, it's the first representative government in history, and it's still going. It established government across time and space. It gives a person a reason to rule, not a passion to rule. Now, the Declaration says, when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the power of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them. This document is correct for all times, because any time is when in the course of human ends. The Constitution establishes a government. And that's what I'm going to leave you with today. Like I said, I want to keep it short. 10 to 15 minutes is all that I want to do this. We're about minutes short of the 15 minutes. And I think that gives us a better base of education and learning than anything that I had previously done. So now we're truly on our way. But we're not to the booklet yet, because this is important stuff to why did we create the Constitution in the first place. And like I said, a lot of this will even go through some slavery like we just did in this, because everybody wants to look backward instead of looking forward. And this will show you where we came from, why we created what we did, and why we went on with it. So, see you next week.